The night they slapped cuffs on me for driving my own car, 3 black sedans from Washington rolled up to that tiny suburban station, and the same officer who called me suspicious realized he had just profiled the woman who signed off on the federal money keeping his department alive. And you know what? I watched the color drain from his face and thought, yeah, this one is not getting buried. My name is Colonel Alicia Turner, United States Air Force Security Cooperation, 25 years in uniform, Bronze Star from Kandahar, 2 decades of sitting in rooms nobody ever sees, reading reports about police departments begging for grants, promising they'd train their people right, promising they'd do better. And then that Sunday afternoon in Riverside, I got a front row seat to how little some of them meant it. I was off duty, no dress blues, no ribbons, just a simple dark blouse, slacks, flats, my dog tags under my shirt where they usually stay when I'm not on base, driving my black BMW 7 Series that everybody on the internet seems to have an opinion about. Now the one my husband David spent 4 deployments saving for, telling me, when you make Colonel, I'm putting you in that car, so every mile you drive, you remember we survived all this. And then he didn't survive the last one. So now that car is not a flex, it's a promise and a gravestone on wheels, if that makes sense. Riverside looked like a movie neighborhood, manicured lawns, stone pillars, joggers with perfect teeth, the kind of silence that makes you feel like if your car stereo is 2 clicks too loud, somebody will send an email. I was just passing through to get back to base. GPS said it was faster, and after all these years I still play by the rules on the road. Full stop signs, turn signals, both hands on the wheel, the whole script I learned as a black kid watching my father get pulled over, delivering mail in neighborhoods they said he didn't match. I saw the cruiser in my mirror before he hit the lights. White Ford Explorer nose tucked in behind me, a little too close. One of those shadows you feel before you can name it, and in my gut came that old familiar mix of annoyance and rehearsed calm, like, all right, here we go. Lights hit. I eased over smooth car and park, both hands up high on the wheel before he even opened his door. Slow breath out. Not because I was guilty of anything, but because history has a way of living in your spine. He walked up like he owned the asphalt, young, maybe early 30s, square jaw, sunglasses, even though the sun was sliding down, hand hovering near his holster like muscle memory or ego. License and registration, he snapped. No greeting, no reason, not even pretending this was anything but a fishing trip. Yes, officer, I said, steady, soft that voice. We all learn the one that says, I am not your threat, even when I could outrank your entire chain of command. Before I move my hands, can you tell me why I've been stopped? Because I asked you to stop, he said, and I swear there was a little smile. This your vehicle? It is, I answered. My registration is in the glove box I'm going to reach with my right hand very slowly. All right? He gave a shrug like he was doing me a favor, glanced at the dash, at the leather, the wood, the badge on my key. Go ahead. Nice ride for this part of town. That one line, nice ride for this part of town, told me everything I needed to know about the story he was already writing in his head. I handed him license, registration, insurance, all clean, all current, all mine. He barely looked, eyes still crawling over me in the car. Where you headed, Ms. Turner? Back to base, I said. Base, he repeated like it was a punchline. And what do you do on base? I'm in security cooperation. I told him I oversee joint programs, training, some funding approvals. He chuckled under his breath. So you're telling me this car, this neighborhood, that story all lines up, huh? My husband was Army, I said, and yeah, my voice tightened a little there. He saved for this car before he was killed in Kandahar. Nothing in his face moved. You live in Riverside? No, sir, I said, just cutting through. He turned slightly, pressed his radio. Dispatch Unit 214, I have a high-value vehicle, out-of-area driver request backup. No speeding, no broken light, no rolling stop, just out of area. You feel that right? Officer, I said, you have my papers. Is there a specific violation? He ignored that chin tipping at my trunk. Pop it. Years of training and a lifetime of being black in America met right there in my throat. Do you have probable cause to search my vehicle? I asked, not loud, not slick, just clear. The word hit him wrong. My probable cause, he said, stepping in closer so I could smell coffee on his breath, is that your story doesn't add up. Pop the trunk, ma'am, or we do this at the station. 2 more cruisers rolled up, lights washing over the perfect lawns, neighbors' blinds twitching. I hit the trunk button. I knew what was in there. I also knew cameras were rolling now, his backup's half a dozen phones. He walked back, leaned in, and there it was, my dress blues hanging in a clear bag, my medals case, the folded flag from David's coffin, the one I still have trouble touching. He grabbed the uniform, held it up. "Cute," he said, playing dress up. "Those are mine," I answered, still in that deadly calm. He opened the metal case, plucked out my Bronze Star, squinted. "You buy this online," and then he let it fall, metal kissing concrete in slow motion. For a second I was not in Riverside. I was 12 again in Cleveland, watching my father face down on a hood while the officer laughed. I was in Kandahar, zipping up a bag that held a soldier who trusted me. I was every time I swallowed something so I wouldn't explode, and I heard my father's voice like a drum. "Never lose your composure, baby girl. They win twice when you do." "Officer," I said, and there was no ma'am coming from me now. "Put my uniform back in the trunk." He didn't. He stepped toward me instead. "Turn around, hands behind your back," he said loud enough for the audience. "You are being detained while we verify this little story." "I have complied with every order," I said, but my wrists were already being grabbed. As he cuffed me, he muttered that line I will never forget. "You people always have a story." I looked over at the younger cop on my left, saw his body cam blinking red. "Officer," I told him quietly, "make sure that keeps recording. Don't look away tonight." In the back of the cruiser, cuffs tight my medal on the ground, my uniform hanging half out of my open trunk. He thought he had won, thought he'd put another mark on his suspicious vehicle tally. That was his world. Mine was different. "I need my phone," I said. "You'll get it at booking," he answered. "Listen carefully," I said, calm enough that even he turned a little. "I am Colonel Alicia Turner, United States Air Force. You are detaining a federal officer without cause, interfering with federal property and authority. If you prevent me from contacting my command right now, that is going in the report under obstruction. Are you sure you want to play that game?" He hesitated just long enough to tell me he knew he was out of his depth, then tossed my phone onto the seat. I called a number I know better than my own, identified myself, gave badge numbers, location summary, and 30 seconds flat. The voice on the other end went from casual to razor sharp. "Copy, Colonel. Remain calm. Do not escalate. We are engaging." By the time we got to the station, the sergeant at the front desk had already taken one call from State Liaison and was in the middle of another from a Pentagon office he'd never heard from directly in his life. Mercer, the officer who cuffed me, tried to sell his version fast. Possible stolen vehicle, fake ID, suspicious narrative, while I stood there in cuffs and said one sentence, "Check the hologram on my ID and call the number on the back." They did. 10 minutes later, 3 government sedans pulled up outside like something out of a movie. Everyone suddenly realized they were extras in. 2 senior Air Force officers walked in with a JAG lawyer and a letter. The JAG man looked at me first. "Colonel Turner, are you all right?" "I will be when these come off," I said. The sergeant fumbled with the key hands, shaking Mercer, stuttering about how she didn't look like, and then stopping because even he heard it. The JAG laid the letter down. "Effective immediately." He read, "All cooperative training funds and federal partnership grants to Riverside Police Department are suspended pending full investigation of the unlawful detention of Colonel Turner and related conduct." You could feel that sentence land. I turned to Mercer. "You didn't just pull over a suspicious vehicle," I told him quietly enough for everyone to hear. "You pulled over the woman who decides if your department gets the tools you brag about, and you showed me exactly why some of you should not have them." He opened his mouth like he wanted to say it was a misunderstanding. I was already done listening. That could have been a personal victory, right? Take the settlement, accept the apology statement, let them blame one bad apple and move on. But watching his body cam with federal investigators that week, hearing him joke, hearing how routine that tone was, how rehearsed, how the younger cop hesitated and then shut up, because that's the culture, I realized something that made me angrier than the cuffs did. He was not broken, he was standard. So when they asked what I wanted, I didn't say fire him first. I said tie your money to their behavior in a way they can't charm their way around. Out of that mess came what they started calling the Turner Standards, a name I did not ask for. But I signed off on the bones. If you take federal or military-linked funds, you commit to real quarterly bias and de-escalation training, not a slideshow. You submit your body cam footage for independent review when there is force or a complaint. You track and publish your stops. And if you are caught in patterns of profiling or abuse, the money stops, no negotiation. Overnight, I went from angry colonel in some comment sections to overreaching bureaucrat in others. Some cops cheered quietly, some cursed me on Facebook. Veterans wrote that if a colonel could get treated like that for driving a car, regular folks had no shot without rules. Mercer got his own hearing internal and very public once the video went viral. He sat there in a suit that didn't fit next to a union lawyer talking about training and split-second decisions, while they played clips of him dropping my medal saying, "You people always say that," and then an older audio pulled from a briefing where his sergeant literally warned him about racial profiling complaints and told him to change course. I was asked to speak. I looked him in the eye and said, "You keep saying you followed training. I have thousands of officers across this country who got the same memos and don't do this. At some point, it's not the protocol, it's who you chose to be when no one stops you." He lost his badge, his certification, his pension. People argued over whether that was too harsh, not enough, or exactly right. I knew this much: if the only time the system cares is when a colonel is on the receiving end, then we haven't fixed anything. So I pushed harder. Congressional committees called. Hearings were held, clips replayed that phrase, Turner standards stuck. A bill with real teeth passed tying big chunks of federal funds to compliance. Departments that used to ignore complaints suddenly rediscovered policy binders. Young recruits were shown my stop as a never-do-this case study. 2 years later, I drove that same BMW, a little more worn, through Riverside again. The intersection where he cuffed me was now a small landscaped corner called Constitution Square, with a simple plaque that read, "Accountability protects everyone." Across the street, the glass-fronted substation displayed their compliance with the Turner standards in big letters, like a restaurant grade. As I stood reading, a young officer stepped out. No sunglasses, hands empty. "Ma'am," he asked, "are you Colonel Turner?" I hesitated, smiled a little. "Sometimes," I said. He swallowed. "We studied your case in the academy. They told us if we ever start sounding like that guy, we either fix ourselves or turn in the badge. I just wanted to say, I get why you're angry. We're trying to be better." And I believed he meant it. "Then remember this." I told him, "Your badge is not armor, it's a contract. You break it on people like me, and it breaks trust for everybody." A little further down the sidewalk, a girl tugged her mother's sleeve, pointing at the plaque. "So did she win?" she asked. Her mom looked over at me without knowing who I was and said, "Nobody wins in that kind of story, baby, but she made it count." That night, telling you all this, I know some of you are thinking he got what he deserved. Some of you think I pulled rank, some of you work in law enforcement and feel like you're paying for a guy you would never want as your partner. So let me ask you, was what happened to Officer Caney to his department justice or just a headline? Do you think tying money to accountability and forcing real oversight actually changes anything on the street, or do people just get better at hiding it? Have you ever been stopped or judged for the car you drive, the street you're on, the color of your skin, the uniform you wear or don't wear? Drop your story in the comments. Argue with me if you need to tell me if I went too far or not far enough. And if you believe that respect shouldn't depend on rank badge or zip code, share this video. So the next officer thinking about turning a hunch into humiliation remembers, there is always someone watching, and sometimes that someone has the power to change the rules.